All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the University of Zurich, in a room nicely overlooking the city. We are here located right between the main building of the university and the ETH, peeking in from the side. In a similarly nice ambience, yesterday my co-organizer Joshua and I attended the Enigma of Human Consciousness conference in CERN yesterday, where we already had the pleasure to listen to Bernardo give a talk, among other people, on a full day of talks about the subject of consciousness. So after a while ago, I discovered a video of Bernardo's online, and I was impressed by the coherence of his thoughts and the quality of his logic. And when Joshua told me that he was corresponding with Bernardo to give a talk here, I was gladly on board. So, with great anticipation, I will now formally introduce our speaker. Bernardo Kastrup has a PhD in computer engineering with specialization in artificial intelligence and reconfigurable computing. He has worked as a scientist in some of the world's most foremost research laboratories, including CERN and the Philips Research Laboratories. He has authored many academic papers and books on philosophy and science. His three latest books are More Than Allegory, Brief Peeks Beyond, and Why Materialism is Baloney. He has also been an entrepreneur and founder of a successful high-tech startup, but next to a corporate life developing technology strategy in the high-tech industry, Bernardo maintains a philosophy blog and continues to develop his ideas about the nature of reality. So let's sit back and enjoy the sharp needle of reason of Bernardo's intellectual clarity to entertain our mental canvases. Please join me in welcoming Bernardo Kastrup.
All right, can you hear me well? Is it coming out from the speakers? No?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Thanks for being here. It's a nice surprise for me to see full house in the evening that we could be spending doing something a lot more fun, maybe and listening to me. I hope I live up to that introduction. So let's see what we can do today. My plan is the following. I'll give you a very brief introduction, like 10, 12 slides. I don't know whether there are philosophers amongst you. If there are, I'm not going to start from the current status quo of philosophy and tell you what problems this solves with respect to panpsychism and cosmopsychism and what are the differences. I'm going to start from first principles to the benefit of the general audience. Okay. During the Q&A, we can go deeper into the more formal philosophical aspects of it. So it will be a short introduction just to tease you, and then my idea, which those guys agreed to, would be we spend the rest of the time interacting, Q&A. You do not need to feel shy if you want to attack me, if you think I'm full of it, but that makes for the best interactions as far as I'm concerned. If you point out why you think this is wrong or where I failed in my thought process, and then we can interact, I can try to rebut the criticisms that you put forward, but you're not going to hurt me. You're not going to hurt my feelings. In the US, it's very important that I say this. Here, I don't think it's very important. You know that anyway. But in the US, people kind of very careful about not hurting the feelings of the speaker. So there's a laser in here, isn't there? Yeah. So my claim will be this, that the universe is entirely mental. This is the title of an essay published in Nature magazine in 2005 by Professor Richard Cohn-Herring, an astronomer at Johns Hopkins University. I will tell a different story than the story he tells, but it leads to the same conclusion. So here we go, if this works. No, it does not. Okay, then I'll type it.
The usual problems. It worked
It's
5
okay,
minutes ago.
no,
It
just
doesn't work.
we just do it here. No, but here doesn't work either.
Yeah.
Maybe here. No, also it doesn't work. It's frozen. So now it's up to you.
There we go.
Yeah?
So you saw it till it moved, neither? can start talking and try to move it.
I may have another one. I'm not sure. No, I may have. No, I don't. I do not have another one.
There we go. It seems to be working, but you need to click very hard.
I have to press very hard.
Yeah, that's okay.
Leave it there. Leave it there. All right, let's see if this works. So,
Go on.
starting from first principles, why do we think, what most of us think, that there is a strongly objective world out there outside of mind? And when I say mind, I use this word as a synonym of phenomenal consciousness. So I don't mean by mind cognition even. I mean just the presence of the qualities of experience, the presence of phenomenal properties. So I use this word in the most generic way possible. Now, there are three key reasons we think that there is a world that is outside mind, defined in this manner. One is that clearly, if I interfere physically with the brain of a person, that person will experience a change in his or her inner life. In other words, physical intervention with the brain changes subjective inner experience. So it seems like the physicality of the brain generates subjective experience, because if I interfere with it, subjective experience changes, right? Think of drugs. If I take alcohol, my subjective inner life will change. So a physical intervention in the chemistry of my brain leads to different subjective inner life. That's one reason. Now let's see if this will work now. This will make the flow, okay, there we go. May complicate the flow of the talk, but we will do our best. We all seem to share the same world as well. If I hear your reports about what you're experiencing around you, they will most likely be consistent with my own experience of the world I seem to be inhabiting right now. So there seems to be a world outside and independent of our minds, out there, right? It's another reason we think of a reality outside mind. And the last reason, okay, we can't change the laws of nature simply by imagining them to be different. There seems to be an independence, a momentum behind the laws of nature that renders them very independent of mind as far as we can experience mind. I can't just dream up a different world or wish it to be different. So there are many more reasons why people postulate an objectively real world outside. Okay, now, what we call matter, let's start from first principles. What do we call matter, this matter that supposedly exists outside of mind? Is that an empirical fact? Do we experience, do we see, do we measure matter outside of mind? No, we don't, because we are locked within mind. Everything we think we measure, everything we know, appears on the screen of perception. Even the output of instrumentation is only known insofar as it appears on the screen of perception. If something is completely outside mind, it is, by definition, unknowable, because knowledge presupposes mind. So this whole idea of something outside mind is an explanatory model. It's an abstraction that we make in order to make sense of experience, but it's not immediately available to experience as such. Physicist Andrei Linde is famous for his theories of cosmic inflation. He's from Stanford. There's a wonderful quote by him that you probably are already reading. I'm not going to read it for you, but you can go through this yourself. The essence of the quote is that he's saying that the subject of physics is, first and foremost, perception. That we then assume that there is some deeper reality that underlies perception, some deeper reality outside mind, because it's useful to make sense of things. If there is a world outside mind out there and we are inhabiting it, that would seem to explain the fact that we all seem to experience the same world, right? It's independent of us, but we inhabit it. Or it would also explain why there are such correlations between measurable brain activity and experience, because that matter of the brain is generating experience, so they correlate. It would also explain why I can't change the laws of nature by imagining them to be different, because the world out there is not in mind, so it's not amenable to influence, to pure mental influence. So it would seem to make sense of a lot of things. The problem is that it leaves the most important thing out, which is how do we explain experience itself. But I'm going to get to this. Let's go to the next one. Let's start from incontrovertible facts that are independent of theory or of philosophical position, right? We know that there is that which experiences, right? There is experience. Experience entails a subject of experience. Many philosophers have made that point. Seems fragile even. It seems to be very self-evident. In fact, I think it is self-evident, but it is also explicitly defended by several philosophers. If there is experience, there is that which is having the experience, right? I'm not saying that it's limited to a higher animal. I'm not saying where its limits are, where its boundaries lie. I'm saying that whatever it is, there is that which experiences, because there is experience. Experience is the primary datum of reality. Another incontrovertible fact, whatever else it may also be, brain function is a perceptual experience. When you talk of a brain, we talk about an object on the screen of perception, something that you can see, something that a surgeon can touch, can slice, can cauterize. Theoretically, it can even be smelled. It's a physical object, and as such, it exists on the screen of perception. It may also be an object that is outside and independent of mind, but that's an explanatory model. It's an inference. What is incontrovertible is that brain function, insofar as we can know it, is a perceptual experience. Okay. And the brain is a physical system. It's composed of the same kinds of atoms and force fields as the rest of the universe. The surgeon can hold that physical object in its hands. So these are incontrovertible facts, independent of theory. Let's see what we can do with this now. What is the simplest explanation for these facts? Now try to get rid of whatever prejudices or assumptions or models of reality you may have. What would be the simplest thing that we can, the simplest explanation that we can derive to make sense of this? Okay, there is that which experiences, that I'm calling TWE, right? Now, the most parsimonious way to link experience itself with that which experiences is to not make an ontological distinction between the two. It's not to say that they are of completely different essences or intrinsic nature. Otherwise, you are not being parsimonious, you're postulating, making more assumptions than you may need, and you have then to explain how these two things are connected. So the most simple thing you can do is to say, well, experience is simply an excitation of that which experiences. And as such, it's not different from that which experiences, in the same way that a dance is not different from the dancer, or that ripples are not different from water. A dance is just the dancer in motion. Ripples are just water in motion. There's nothing to water, to ripples but water. There's nothing to a choreography but the dancer. The same thing would apply then for excitations of TWE and TWE itself. In other words, experiences and experiencer. One is an excitation of the other. And then there are two experiential perspectives. There is an extrinsic perspective, like brain function, and there is an intrinsic one, which is somebody's inner life. So what I am experiencing right now is my intrinsic perspective of that which I am. When you see me, or if you would instrument me now and measure my brain activity through an fMRI scanner or an MEG, whatever, you would be having then an extrinsic view of my inner life. In other words, my inner life appears to you as my body, my brain activity. That's what we can infer very parsimoniously. I'm not saying that one causes the other. I'm saying that one is the image of the other. This is what we can derive from observation. And both are just experiences insofar as we can really know. Right? Your inner life is directly experienced. And you only know about the brain activity of somebody else insofar as that is also experienced. Maybe through instrumentation, but it's also an experience. Okay. So what I'm going to say is that brain function is simply the extrinsic appearance of conscious inner life. It's the image of it. Because that's what's available to us empirically. Now, the challenge is to make sense of all salient facts of existence based on this. And that's what I'm trying to hint at in the next slide. Now, first point is, I have been so far agnostic about what is that which experiences, right? I didn't say it was a person, I just said it necessarily was there. Insofar as there is experience, there is that which experiences. What I'm going to argue now is that it is universal, because that makes the explanation much easier and parsimonious afterwards. There is some reasoning behind this. Technology is not helping today. We've seen earlier that the brain is a physical system just like the rest of the cosmos, right? So what is nature telling us? Nature is telling us that the matter of the brain, that physical system, is the way inner life appears to another person from a second person point of view. And now we know that the rest of the cosmos is also made of matter. So the suggestion is that what matter is, what is matter? Matter is the second person perspective of direct first person experience. And then I'll extrapolate that to everything and see how far we can go under this view. Now, another reason to extrapolate is the following. One could argue that, well, the brain is what experience looks like from a second person perspective because the brain generates experience, right? That's why, and that would be unique to the specific structure of the brain. The brain is associated with the experience because it is a brain. But the table and the rest of the inanimate universe is not a brain. It does not have that structure, that configuration. And that's what makes a difference. The problem is that this doesn't seem to work because nobody so far in the world has been able to, even in principle, conceive of a way to deduce the qualities of experience from physical parameters. Nobody is able to deduce the warmth of fire, the bitterness of disappointment, even the redness of an apple, from mass, momentum, spin, position, physical quantities. So there is no reason in principle to say that there is a discontinuity in nature, that the brain is special in its relationship to experience. No, for all you know, all matter is just the extrinsic view of inner experience. Therefore, the cosmos too must be the way inner life appears to us, for the exact same reason that that's what the brain is. Now, each step I'm making here, there's a paper to, literally, there's a paper behind that step. I'm giving you just really the very short summary of this, just to tease you. We can go into much more details in the Q&A if you want. Okay. So the inference is then that which experiences is universal. But of course, then we have to explain why I do not know what's going on across the universe. We have to explain why I can't even read your thoughts. Because if that which experiences is one and universal, why do we all have separate inner lives, right? That then becomes the burden, the explanatory burden of this whole approach. But before we get to that, some people hate me for using these pictures, with good reason. Because pictures can be incredibly misleading, right? If I crop it in just the right way and apply some color filters, then everything looks like anything else. I can make a car look like a sewing machine if I crop it just right. But still, this is too suggestive not to use. This is a neuron in a mouse's brain. This is a large-scale structure of the universe. Actually, it's a foam structure. It's much more than that. But there have been quantitative analysis of the structure of the universe at its largest scales, with at least two different groups I am aware of, one in the University of California at San Diego, one in Europe. And the similarities are striking. The structural similarities between a human brain and the cosmos as a whole are striking, and they are so far unexplained. I think I have an excerpt from a press release. Yeah, I do have. This is a paper published on the Scientific Reports. I think it was 2012. Yeah, and there was a press release by the University of California at San Diego accompanying this, and this is the key quote. After this paper was published, there was a lot. It inspired much more analysis, even in Europe, and other studies have confirmed this similarity, which, in the context of what I'm claiming to you, that TWE is universal, that which experiences is universal, and that matter is just the image of its inner life, this is very handy. The brain is clearly the image of your personal inner life. And if the same applies to the universe as a whole, there should be some kind of structural, not necessarily functional, some kind of structural similarity between the universe as a whole and a brain. And it's exactly what people see. All right, let me continue now with the story. So, a little bit too far. So, how do these two perspectives of experience arise? Remember, I mentioned two perspectives of experience. The intrinsic view, what I experience as my inner life right now, and the extrinsic image, what you see of my inner life indirectly through analyzing the patterns of my brain activity, right? I claim that this extrinsic view is matter, and the intrinsic view is just your subjectivity, the phenomenal properties of your life. So how do these two perspectives arise? Why is there this polarity in nature? Why isn't everything just one big thought? Why is there perception? Matter is perception, as you saw from the quote that I showed earlier. And that's the attempt to make sense of that in very general terms, and will not have opportunity to go in details here. Suppose it all starts with ideas, thoughts, emotions, not perception. I might call all of these thoughts to make it simple. There is a psychiatric process called dissociation. It's well known, it's in the DSM-5, was already in the DSM-4, has been recently confirmed by a variety of studies using brain imaging, EEGs, all kinds of things. You probably know of it from the old name. How was it called? Multiple personality disorder. That's it, thank you. It's today called dissociative identity disorder. And the idea is that one formerly integrated psyche breaks up into multiple disjoint centers of experience. And these disjoint centers do not have access to the phenomenality of each other. They become apparently separate, even though they are part of one single psyche, one single person. And each disjoint center is then called an alter. That's the psychiatric terminology. Dissociation explains how the unity of the psyche can apparently fragment. And I emphasize apparently because these people can be cured. The alters can reintegrate. So the psyche was never actually fragmented. There was only a breakup in the implicit logic between the cognitive associations that are made in the psyche. Now, I needed more graphs to explain this to you more clearly, but in essence, that's the claim here. There is a break in the chain of cognitive associations that are made, and then that creates disjoint centers of experience. Now, an illustration is this. You have one psyche with ideas and emotions, and then some of those ideas and emotions break away, so to say, and form a disjoint center of ideas and emotions. Now, once that happens, you have a psychic boundary here. And the claim in very general terms, again, there's a paper behind this, is ideas and emotions or thoughts that surround a dissociative boundary can impinge on it. There's a lot of clinical data that this happens. Dissociated emotions can affect your thoughts. Dissociated expectations can affect your perceptions, even to the point of creating hallucinations. So things that are dissociated can still impinge on each other around the dissociative boundary. My claim is that this happens at a universal level, and that the dissociative boundary is the screen of perception. The thoughts that are out there impinge on our dissociative boundary, and the result of that is what we call perception. Now, you can raise a number of questions around this, like, well, if it's just thought impinging on thought, why do perceptions feel so qualitatively different than thoughts? Perceptions are qualitatively totally different from thoughts, right? So how does that happen? There's a number of arguments around this. I summarized that in some of the papers. For instance, one line of argument is to say that perceptions are just encoded representations of thoughts outside the dissociative boundary. And that encoding is important for evolutionary reasons in order to control, to bound the entropy of this dissociated boundary, a living being. If you would just replicate the mental states here inside, there would be no bound to entropy and the organism would dissolve into an entropic soup. That's one line of argument. There are other lines of argument to explain why perceptions necessarily have to be qualitatively different than thoughts and emotions. So perception is the extrinsic appearance, as far as an outer is concerned, of the thoughts that surround it in mental space. That's what the world is. And that's why my definition of matter earlier should make sense within the logic of my story. Matter is just how thoughts appear across a dissociative boundary. That's what matter is, and there is nothing more that it is. That's why your brain activity correlates so well with your inner life, because it is the extrinsic appearance of your inner life as perceived from across the dissociative boundary. And there is nothing more to it than that. And the same would apply to all matter in the inanimate universe. But then the question, of course, is what then constitutes the boundaries of an experiencing subject? What qualifies in the physical universe as an entity or process that corresponds to an outer of that which experiences, an outer of TWE? That's the question that we will try to address now. Okay. So my claim is that a biological body, metabolism, is the extrinsic appearance of dissociation. That TWE has, quote, dissociative identity disorder at a universal scale, and that biology, life, metabolism, is the extrinsic appearance of universal dissociative identity disorder. That's what we are. We are alters of TWE, so to say. And that's the claim here. We are these dissociated alters. And that's why we have separate inner lives. So how does this work? Suppose you are this alter here, and you're immersed in the phenomenal activity of TWE around you. Here you would have the phenomenal activity that corresponds to inanimate matter. The inanimate universe here. But as part of the phenomenal activity surrounding you, of course, there may be another dissociated alter. And that dissociated alter will impinge on its environment, which will in turn impinge on the boundary, the dissociative boundary of your alter, leading to perception. My claim is that the image of this other dissociative activity in your immediate environment is a body, a person, an amoeba, a cockroach, a tree, whatever. All life. And that the feature that unifies all life, metabolism, is itself the image of dissociation in TWE at a universal scale. Now, can we substantiate this a little more? There's a Dutch study done in 2014 by Jolande Schlumpf and others. They put people with the diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder in a brain scanner, and they used as controls actors simulating DID. Not only the behavior, but trying to think in dissociated ways. You know what I mean? Really trying to incorporate that. And they use those as controls. And turned out that the brain activity patterns of the people with actual dissociative identity disorder had identifiable. There were clear differences between the two. In other words, there is something dissociative processes look like when examined. There are identifiable characteristics to dissociative processes. So my claim is that that's what's happening at the universal scale. We have there your universal nervous system, between quotes, because there's all kinds of reasons why it's wrong to say that the universe is a nervous system. I'm trying to convey an intuition to you and not be precise. This is not a philosophy conference. And that when dissociation happens at that level, that dissociation, bear with me. Oh, no, not yet here. Oh, this really stole my thunder. That dissociation has an image, and it's life. It's us. This, at the universal scale, corresponds to this, at a personal scale. Does the claim make sense? Even if you think it's total nonsense, do you understand what I'm trying to... okay. All right. Is this substantiated? There's all kinds of other lines of argument for this, and Henry published this paper in Nature. The core of his argument, which I didn't underline here, but the core of his argument is that is this correspondence between the patterns of our logical thinking, of our rationality, and the way the world works. The fact that mathematics works so well in the world, although clearly it's an entirely subjective thing, something that happens in our heads. It's our basic intuitions about what should be true, and it happens to work out there, across galaxies. It's amazing, isn't it? And that's one of his lines of argument. There's a physical line of argument as well, based on the phenomenon of quantum entanglement. I don't know how many of you are familiar with physics, but there is this idea based on some inequalities that have been put forward by different people. The last one was Leggett in 2003. This idea that if quantum theory is correct as far as entanglement is concerned, then first, the universe cannot be real and local at the same time. What does this mean? Real means that things have whatever physical properties they have, independent of whether they are being observed. That's the definition of realism in physics. And local means that influences cannot play a role faster than the speed of light. That's locality. And if quantum theory is correct, then these two things cannot be simultaneously true. Either the universe is not real in the sense I just defined, or things can influence each other faster than the speed of light. Until very recently, there was no way to distinguish between the two in the sense of choosing which one we had to discard. Most physicists thus discarded locality, and people started talking about non-local hidden properties, properties that are smeared out across space and time, that bring everything together. Bohr's theory is an example of that. But recently, some inequalities that were experimentally confirmed isolated realism and said non-contextual realism cannot be true. I use the qualifier now, non-contextual, so the physicists watching this will not say that I misrepresented the physics, but it makes very little difference in practice. Non-contextual, okay, now that I got into it, I will explain. Non-contextual realism means that the properties are out there, physically objective, and they do not depend for their values on how I observe them. If that's not true, can there be some form of realism? Yes. What that would imply is that there would be a universe in an objective state A out there, but every time I would look at it, it would change into state B, and I would never access A. It would be forever beyond me, because every time I look at it, it changes into another state. But theoretically, there is in state A. That's what contextual realism would mean. It's a completely, in my opinion, completely nonsensical thing to postulate. It's trying to accommodate your view of reality in a completely arbitrary way. If you never access state A, it's not there. There's no reason to postulate it, right? Moreover, it grants us Superman powers, no, much more than Superman powers. Just by looking at things, it changes the whole world. That's what it would imply. My claim is that there is no state A. The world is perception. There is nothing underlying perception that isn't mental itself. Yes, there is mentality out there, outside my personal mentality. There are thoughts out there that are not part of me. And when those thoughts interact with mine, that's what I call perception. So there is something out there that holds the state of the world when I am asleep, all right? I'm not a solipsist. But that something is also mental. It is phenomenal in nature. It's not matter outside mind. Yeah? That's the claim. Oh, just to conclude what I was saying here. So, lots of tests have confirmed contextuality defeating non-contextual realism. So there is a physical line of evidence that's hardly discussed outside the very small field of foundations of physics, which is surprising because it has consequences for everything. It's not discussed even outside foundations of physics, in physics itself, let alone in biology, let alone outside academia. It's unfortunate. All right. So how do, now going back to the beginning, this is my last slide. I started with 3 observations that motivated materialism. Remember what they were. I'll recall them now, and I'll explain them in a different way. Attempt to explain them in a different way. Brain function correlates with inner experience. Of course it does. If a body, which includes brain function right here, is the extrinsic appearance of dissociated phenomenal activity in the mental environment that surrounds me, of course it will correlate. The image of a process correlates with the process it is an image of. Right? It's very straightforward. What was the other observation? We all seem to share the same world. We do. We all share the phenomenal environment of thoughts in TWE that surrounds our respective alters. That phenomenal environment impinges on the dissociative boundary of our alters, leading to a consistent world shared by us all, with some adjustments for perspective, point of view. Also easily explainable. And the third one, the laws of nature are independent of our personal desires, our personal wishes, imagination, and so forth. What are these personal desires, wishes, and imagination? But phenomenal activity in the alter, and therefore dissociated from the rest. And if it is dissociated from the rest, it cannot fundamentally change the patterns that govern this rest. It is dissociated, so we cannot change the laws of nature at will. We can only impact nature through our dissociative boundary. What is the extrinsic appearance of our dissociative boundary? It's our skin, the surface of our body, right? The claim is that the body is the image of our alter, so the surface of the body is the surface of the dissociative boundary. And by moving that, we can impact the world. It's called physical labor. But we cannot, by simply thinking something, impact the laws of nature, because our pure thoughts are dissociated from the rest. So I'll leave it here. It took longer than I expected. I don't know whether there is a moderator today, whether somebody wants to play that role. But I would say, especially to those who think that I'm full of it, speak up. We can go into a lot more detail. I have a lot more content that I didn't share with you. But if I would just volunteer that, I would speak for 5 hours. So if I'm guided by your questions, it would help.
All right, so we have the microphone here. Raise your hand and I'll come to you.
I don't need a microphone.
I think for the recording, they want you to speak on the...
Hi. Is that okay, Josh?
Okay.
I have a question about your assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
One of the assumptions that you didn't mention probably would make it really complex, the fact that when you're doing, these are kind of thought experiments, but the very nature of thought experiments means that you're using language.
Correct.
And the language itself is another level of perception. So how do you take that into account? The fact that
That's a fundamental problem already pointed out by, in last century alone, Owen Barfield, I think in the 50s or 60s, Kuhn, the philosopher of science, pointed this out, that our observations and explanations are not really neutral, they are loaded with the set of assumptions in this implicit philosophy we call languages. I think it was Aldous Huxley who considered languages implicit philosophies. A very, very interesting observation, very sharp. I don't solve that fundamental problem. To communicate, to talk about it, I need to use language. To think about it, I need to use language, right? Chomsky already said that we think in terms of language.
But that also goes back to disassociation, because it's already we are disassociated. I wouldn't call it fragmented consciousness, more like split consciousness, because part of me say, I think that my name is blah blah, but why do I need to say that to myself? Why don't I just know that? Why do I need to say that to myself? So
Okay,
the consciousness split at that, even at that level, that fundamental level.
What I'm positing here is that there is a primary process in nature, dissociation, that explains the world, and not the world explains dissociation. I'm taking dissociation as a primary phenomenon in nature. And that creates a private phenomenal field. Right? Each alter has its own private phenomenal field. You do not have access to my private phenomenal field now. For one, you cannot see yourself from the perspective I'm seeing you. And you do not have access to my thoughts and feelings right now. So there is a private phenomenal field. I think that is prior to language. That's independent of language. My cat doesn't speak, and I think my cat has a private phenomenal
How
field.
do you assess that? That's the main thing. How do I get there? Bypassing consciousness and thinking.
I think I'll get there. Give me just a few more seconds. So that private phenomenal field precedes language. Within that private phenomenal field, language arises. Even our thoughts are linguistic in nature, right? I'm with Chomsky in that regard, although a whole bunch of people disagree with him. So language arises as certain patterns of excitation within the private phenomenal field. The problem happens when, as part of those thoughts, of those excitations, you say, I am these excitations, I am these thoughts I have, I am this self-image I have, I am this person I'm separate from the rest. That's a thought. This identification is a thought that arises within that private phenomenal field. It is theoretically conceivable that although you have a private phenomenal field, you do not identify with it. That identification arises as a linguistic process within the private phenomenal field. But that phenomenal field has to be there to begin with, otherwise you wouldn't even have that thought. So there has to be a more primary level of dissociation, even for language to come and play this nasty role of mistaken identification. That would be my reaction to this. Yeah.
So I can see how metabolism fits into like this model of being like what we see as an external perspective. But my thought was, I mean, another fundamental process in biology is reproduction. So how does that fit in with the dissociation? I mean, you have to have some sort of de novo dissociation that a new entity is created. But why is this always like only one entity? Or, like, why is the relationship that way? Do you have any thoughts?
I've given this a lot of thought. Yeah. The answer to this will not be a clean philosophical answer because it's a very difficult problem. It has to do with abiogenesis. I mean, how did life originate to begin with, right? If I'm saying that life is the image of dissociation, how did dissociation first start? We know how it's continuing through reproduction, but how did it first start? I will speculate. I will simply speculate, which is valid because nobody understands abiogenesis anyway, okay? My speculation is the following. To form a dissociative alter at first is very difficult. It's a very rare thing in nature. All the right conditions have to be there. Nature would tend to remain integrated and not to dissociate. Once that dissociation does happen, it can maintain itself through reproduction. It's like a metaphor I once used was, imagine you're trying to break into your own house. You know, you lost your keys, you're trying to break into your own house. And you can punch a hole in the door. And you can punch another hole next to the first one, and another, until it's big enough so you can go through. Or you can punch one little hole and open it from the inside. My view of reproduction is this. It's very difficult to dissociate, but once you're in, you can open it from the inside. You can lead to more dissociative processes once there are already dissociative processes and probably uses less energy. And I'm using the word energy here in a metaphorical way. But that's speculation. And it will remain speculation until we understand abiogenesis, until we understand how life can arise from non-life to begin with. There was somebody there who raised his hand very early. Yeah.
Thanks. I have a question concerning your arguments around non-contextual realism.
Mm-hmm.
So, in easier words, you're arguing against the idea of an objective wave function in quantum mechanics.
No, I'm not arguing against that. No.
Okay.
I actually think there is a wave function independent of me. But that wave function is not physical quantities. They are probabilities for the existence of physical quantities. That's what a wave function is, right? So a wave function is not mass 1 kilo or charge positive. A wave function is the probabilities that the charge may be this or that, or that the position may be that or that. That's all a wave function is. So to say that there is a wave function out there, it doesn't help realism too much. You would have to be a very counterintuitive realism to say that the physical world is real in the form of a wave function. In other words, the physical world is real in the form of probabilities and not actual physical quantities. Some people do try to argue in that direction. There are physicists who have written papers along that direction. The idea here is to look for something in physics that does not depend on observation. And those can be found. The problem is the assumption behind those attempts is always the same, which is there is already a classical world around the quantum system in a superposition state. There is no way then to define an objective state without assuming the classical world. And that's a cheat, because the world is quantum. You have to explain the classical world to begin with and not assume it in order to explain the objectivity of a system in a superposition state. Now, I use lots of jargon now. Okay, let me try to simplify this.
Actually don't see the problem in these arguments that you have. Well, I don't even see that you have to have a classical world around quantum mechanical to actually to break this probabilities, for example, down. I mean, this probabilities break down if you interact in the system, but you can also have two quantum mechanical systems interacting with each other. So where exactly the problem comes in?
What I'm telling is that a wave of probabilities does not qualify as the real world of realism. The real world of realism means that physical quantities, not the probabilities thereof, but actual physical quantities exist independent of observation. That's the definition of realism. A wave function is an epistemic thing. Even if it is actually ontic, it really doesn't solve the realist problem, because you still do not have objective physical quantities. Even if the probabilities really exist out there, you do not have an objective physical world, only probabilities thereof. Do you see where I'm going with this? You're not a realist if you say probabilities exist, really, objectively, out there. You run into all kinds of philosophical qualms, like how can there be probabilities without a physical substrate? What is the meaning of probability? What's even the meaning of information without a substrate? So you already run into all kinds of problems. But even if you did that, it wouldn't be realism. Realism is about the reality of physical quantities, independent of observation. Yeah?
Okay, I have to give it a thought.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for your talk. My question basically revolves around the fact that we experience a kind of regularities in the world. So, for example, if ball A hits a ball B, the ball B will move, and so on. And so my question is basically, how can your theory explain this? And so the point where I'm coming from, I'm just trying to understand better what you're saying. And so this is not a critique, I'm not saying,
no,
if you can't explain this, then this theory must be wrong. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just curious how this causally consistent world fits into your model.
Yeah, even if it were a critique, it would be fine too. You wouldn't believe what kind of things I get sometimes. To say that the world out there is phenomenal and not outside mind does not contradict the empirical fact that that world unfolds according to predictable patterns and regularities. That if ball A hits ball B, that in turn hits ball C, that regularity can be predicted and it will be consistently observed. In other words, there's nothing in what I said that would preclude the possibility that the thoughts here surrounding the altars unfold in a very regular and predictable manner. That our human thoughts are rather reactive and unpredictable and unstable is a product of evolution by natural selection in a planetary ecosystem. We evolved that way. We needed to react to our environment. We had to deal with uncertainties. But none of those evolutionary pressures played out here in the universe at large. There was no evolution in a planetary ecosystem. So that these thoughts then unfold in a very regular manner may be just the way nature is. And the image of that is the regularity of the laws of nature as we observe them.
Thank you. And so the way nature is would be, like, it would just be part of the bigger, like, non-dissociated TWE.
Correct. That would be the inanimate universe here. And of course, these are animate, but they would appear to us in the form of life. And those can be very crazy and unpredictable.
Thank you.
So I got a bit confused at one point, and that is, as far as I got you right, everything in the universe has the possibility to be experienced. But you also said everything living, and as we didn't really define the living, I just have a more like clarifying question that if we define dead matter as let's say a state within these metabolistic rhythms that we experience, would you say that this dead matter, like ashes or something like this, has an intrinsic experience?
I can answer yes and no, and both will be right in different contexts. So the answer is not simple, so bear with me, okay? What I'm saying is that matter, all matter, is the extrinsic appearance of inner experience. Everything. Now the question is, what is the image of dissociated inner experience? It's a different question. In other words, where does the boundary of the altar lie? I say that the boundaries of the altars lie in biology. Biology is the image of dissociated altars. But all matter is the extrinsic appearance of inner life. So let's make this very concrete now. Is there something it is like to be this device? Does this device have a dissociated inner life of its own? I think no. I think there isn't. Because I think this device is a conceptual invention of our thoughts. There is no such a thing as this device. What we call a device is part of the broader image of the inanimate universe, which does not have proper parts. Now I'm appealing to mereology now. Basically what I'm saying is that there are no separate inanimate things. For instance, we may say on the basis of functional criteria that the spark plugs are intrinsic to the car. But if you use that rationale, you have to add environmental air that allows combustion and cools the engine. You have to allow for the road that the tires grip in order to make the car move. And now you also have to include the gravity that pulls the car to the road, and so on and so forth. Very quickly you realize that there is no such a thing as a car, there is only the inanimate universe. Another line of argument, and that's a physical one, he alluded to it when he talked about observation and entanglement, are von Neumann's chains. And the claim there, made by von Neumann in the 1930s, is that when two quantum systems interact, no measurement is performed, they simply become entangled, right? And if those interact with one another, they simply become entangled. And recently, some philosophy papers have been published with the claim that the whole universe, the whole inanimate universe at least, is one entangled system without proper parts. And what we call parts or individual objects is just an epistemic definition. It's for convenience. If you want to sell a car, you need to define what a car is. You need to sell this thing, you need to define what it is. But it's arbitrary to say that the handle of the mug is separate from the mug. The handle is cognitively salient, but there is no ontic basis for saying that it's separate from the mug. And there is no ontic basis to say that the mug is separate from the table it's sitting on. It's an epistemic classification. It's for our own convenience. That the entire inanimate universe is only one thing. There's one line of art. Therefore, if the entire inanimate universe is one thing, that one thing is the image of the inner life of the entire inanimate universe as a whole. So there's nothing it's like to be this device. There's only something it's like to be the inanimate universe as a whole. The only proper parts are dissociated alters. For those, there is a non-tick criteria to say they're really parts. I'll tell you right now what it is. I cannot say that this table is part of my body, right? Because I don't sense that table in the way that I sense my skin. I cannot say that this patch of my skin is not part of me in the sense that I can say that the hood of my jacket is not part of the jacket. Because these I feel, right? My ability to move by mere intention is limited to my body. So there is a non-tick criteria for defining a biological creature, conscious biological creature, as a proper part. But there isn't such a criterion for anything else in the inanimate universe. Now, just to complete the thought of an intuition, is there anything it is like to be a single neuron in your brain as far as you can experience? Did you understand the question?
No. Sorry.
Can you experience a single neuron in your brain? No. Or can you only experience your brain as a whole? You can only experience your brain as a whole. That's you, right? There is nothing it feels like to be a single neuron in and of itself in your brain as far as you can experience it, right? My claim is exactly the same for this. There is nothing it's like to be this device. There's only something it's like to be the inanimate universe as a whole. Yet, the single neuron in your brain is part of the extrinsic appearance of your inner life from my perspective. Therefore, consciousness does underlie it. So consciousness does underlie this device. It is part of the extrinsic appearance of the universe's inner life. Therefore, consciousness underlies it. In the same way that consciousness underlies the single neuron in your head.
I completely agree.
Yeah?
And I would like to add that in your example of you are different from the table, that it might be a nice image to describe it to others like me, that still the table might be a structure built by your grandfather as an expression of his existence. Or his.
Yeah, now you're bringing alter creativity into the picture. That goes beyond the original scope of the question, but I see where you're going with this, yeah.
Thanks.
Maybe you can, don't forget the front part here, because I left.
Hello. Just one question, because you said, I mean, like, maybe your arm is part of you, what defines you maybe, because you can experience it. So when you look with your eyes at this bottle of water, you experience it with your eyes, what's the difference?
Yeah.
Okay, your leg,
Good question.
I mean, like,
yeah.
It's the same.
Yeah, it's semantic. The point is semantic, but it's very subtle, and so I'm glad you asked it. I can experience photons hitting my retina. I can experience sound waves impinging on my skin or my eardrums. But I cannot experience sound waves bouncing off the window. If they bounce off the window and then they impinge on my eardrums, then I experience them. I experience the bottle only insofar as those photons are hitting my retina. My retina is part of my body. So the analogy would be, if this bottle were in another room, None of its photons are hitting my retina, but they are hitting the wall of the other room. If I sensed that, then those walls would be part of my body. Yeah? Okay.
So you seem to give a lot of thought about the universe, the laws of physics. You mentioned quantum mechanics, entanglement, and the basic integration. So I don't quite see the connection to us, to experience, to the mind. Of course, the brain exists in the physical world, but I could well imagine that the brain also exists in some other universe and some other physical laws. You can simulate the brain. You can imagine the brain in the classical Newtonian universe. So why do you think the laws of physics are relevant, or what's important about this universe? Can't you?
You're talking in terms of multiple universes, the multiverse. What would be the counter hypothesis that you're trying to illustrate?
Well, I'm just curious. Why do you think our universe is, or why it's so important that we live in this universe? Can't you? You could also think that some intelligent beings live in a completely different universe with some completely different laws of physics. You don't need quantum mechanics for the brain.
Okay, I understood you now. I said that the brain is just the extrinsic appearance of dissociated conscious inner life, right? Quantum mechanics is part of our effort to model that appearance. I think the whole of physics is an effort to model and predict appearances. And as such, it's extraordinarily valid because we live in appearances. What else? So I'm all for quantum mechanics. I'm all for science. I take them very seriously because they are extraordinarily informative. They reveal to us the patterns and regularities of nature's behavior. And to do philosophy in a vacuum of that is a waste of time. You're philosophizing about what? It's not about our world, because one is ignoring what we know about our world. So what we know about the world is very important. It informs philosophy. Now, does that mean that I reject the possibility that there are other parallel realities that do not follow these laws of physics, that may not even follow our normal laws of classical logic, Aristotelian logic, where maybe the law of excluded middle doesn't hold, where there are true contradictions. I'm open to that. But I will not philosophize deeply about that, because then to philosophize about a hypothesis, I prefer to philosophize about the wealth of information we have about this here, right now, and remain open to other hypotheses. I'm not sure this answer is satisfying to you. Maybe you want to follow up again.
Yeah, but I'm just surprised that you talk so much about the physical world at all, because if you want to understand how the mind works, I don't see why it's relevant in which universe we are living in.
I think I know where you're coming from, but I hesitate taking your bait. I hesitate going there. This is the world I see every day. It's the world of most relevance to me. Maybe there are occasions in which we are off to the races, somewhere else, some other world. But I don't know enough about that to weave any relevant argument or propose any intelligent model, or to have an informed opinion about whatever might be going on in whatever other sphere of mind there might exist. What I think is important is that our view of reality accommodates for that experience, because enough people have this experience of alternative things going on for this to be taken seriously as relevant data. Anecdotal, and I don't mean it in a pejorative sense, anecdotal in the sense that it's not collected under controlled conditions, but relevant for sheer statistical power, for sheer volume of the testimonials that you hear. And from that perspective, I think one should have a view of reality that accommodates for that. If you have a physicalist view of reality, it dismisses that possibility. It says it's impossible. I'm proposing something that does not depend on this existing, but if it does exist, my view accommodates it. And that I think is a positive point. Not a crucial point, but a positive point.
Just for clarification, if I understood well, I was digesting. So, do I understand right that you actually propose that the universe emerged at the point where the first author emerged, and if all happens to die out at the point, go extinct, then the universe will just shut off like a television?
I understand the question. As usual, there is no straightforward yes and no answer. Imagine these thoughts here before the first author ever formed. Were there thoughts? Of course. I think there were thoughts in that which experiences, in universal consciousness, before the origin of life. In other words, before the first author ever formed. And that's why we have cosmological history that precedes the origin of life. There was something going on before life formed. Life is just a dissociated part of consciousness, but there was consciousness, and therefore the universe before life arose.
But we don't know it, because it can be thought that this was a universal...
We can infer it. Now you could say, well, all inferences are invalid unless we experience it directly. Maybe that's a very radical skeptic position, but you would have to throw away 95% of science, because most of science is inferential. I'm not prepared to go that far. I think there was something going on before life arose, before the first author ever formed. The next question is, did it look like the physical universe we see? No, of course not. The physical universe we see arises from the impingement of those thoughts on the dissociative boundaries. That's where the qualities we associate with physicality arise from. Since there were no dissociative boundaries before the origin of life, there were no physical qualities as we know them. There was no perception. There was nothing to perceive. So what existed? There were thoughts. Those thoughts had phenomenal properties, but they were qualitatively distinct from the perceptual properties we experience today. There was something corresponding to the physical universe we see today before life arose, but how that felt qualitatively was probably very different from the qualities of perception, because there was no dissociative boundary for it to impinge on and therefore give rise to perception. There was a thought before life arose. That's my point. I think I lost you.
Yeah, because it means that all the experiments, all the experiences to understanding how life emerges actually nonsense, because the world how we understand now is not the world as it was when the life actually came.
No, I would disagree with that. The image we have of the thoughts, the image in the perceptual screen on the dissociative boundary of the author, correspond consistently to a certain pattern of thoughts out there. So, right? There is a correspondence between perception and whatever is going on out there.
Wait a minute, you're saying there's an original thought, that these are modeled after? Can you repeat that? You said something.
Okay. What I'm saying is, the universe just begun, there was no life. There were no authors. Therefore, there were no dissociative boundaries. Therefore, there was no perception. Therefore, there was no blue, no red, no warmth, no texture. There was no perception. There was only a first-person perspective. First-person perspective, the closer we can get to it is to imagine how it feels to have a thought. Right? So that's all there was. There were thoughts. No perception. Now an author arose, formed. Now I have perception, because those thoughts are impinging on my dissociative boundary. In other words, my sense organs, my skin, my eyes, my ears. And now I form images here that correspond to those thoughts. There is a correspondence between the qualities of perception and the qualities of those thoughts out there. I do not know how those thoughts feel like from a first-person perspective, because I'm dissociated from them. But I know there is a correspondence because perception arises from the impingement of those thoughts here. So they must correspond in the sense that effects corresponds to causes. Now I can extrapolate this correspondence back in time to a point before life arose. And although perceptions did not exist, my imagination with the qualities of perception is still accurate in the sense that that correspondence will still hold. So I can imagine the universe before life in terms of the qualities of perception. It is appropriate to do so because the correspondence holds retroactively. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So it's a bit related. I'm not entirely sure whether I get...
Where are you? Oh, okay.
Yes. I'm not sure whether I get why you place such a special position to the biological system. So why does these boundaries, these dissociation, why do they happen when life originates? Do you have an idea about that?
You're a philosopher, aren't you?
I am not.
No? Because I get this a lot from panpsychist philosophers. Why life? Why are you so chauvinistic? Why isn't an electron a subject in its own merit, a dissociated little alter in its own merit? I have a friend in philosophy. I respect him a lot, Ite Shani, and he proposes an ontology called cosmopsychism. He doesn't talk about dissociated alters, but he means that, and we use different terminologies. And he says, well, the most elementary physical particles are dissociated alters, and then they combine to form our unitary consciousness. That's his position, which I respect. I don't think we need to do that. I don't think we need to go all the way down to subatomic particles through dissociation and then go half the way up again through combination to explain the human unitary perspective. But to answer your question more directly now, there are many lines of argument behind this association between biology and individual subjects. One of them I already hinted at. It's physical. It's von Neumann chains. Von Neumann showed that if two physical systems interact, they just become entangled. No measurement is performed. So everything should be one whole without proper parts. We know we are parts. We know that that thing is not part of me. I can't feel that thing. I can see it because its photons are impinging on me, but I cannot feel the photons that impinge on it. And we know that physicists, as human beings, do perform observations. We observe all the time. So we know that von Neumann's chains must break at the level of a conscious physicist. Von Neumann knew that. That's why he said, well, consciousness causes collapse, which is a sort of a dualist perspective. I don't subscribe to that. It was his way of getting out of this trap. And the trap is his observation that everything gets entangled, but clearly life doesn't, because life observes. Therefore, life is privileged. That's one line of argument. Another line of argument is that all we can know for sure that has dissociated conscious inner life is ourselves. I know I have dissociated conscious inner life. I know I'm conscious, and I know I don't know what's happening in your head right now. So I know that about me. And I see other people that are like me who manifest behaviors suggestive to me that they also have dissociated conscious inner lives. Your behavior is much equivalent to mine in many ways as two human beings. As a matter of fact, my cat's behavior is very suggestive, based on my own experience of my conscious inner life, that my cat also has a dissociated stream of experiences. Did you know that amoeba construct vases out of mud grains that they pick up from the bottom of the mud where they live? They make these nice symmetric vases and they go live in. They build houses. Amoeba. Can you think of anything simpler? Amoeba manifest behavior that are suggestive of their having also dissociated streams of experience. So this line of thought suggests that, well, it's life. Life is what has dissociated streams of human experience. Therefore, alters should correspond to life. A third line of argument is that although there are many forms of life out there, there's one thing that unifies them all with each other and separates them from the rest of nature, and that's metabolism. Every life metabolizes. Now I'm excluding viruses from my definition of life. And the microbiologists amongst you, yes, I'm excluding viruses. Okay. All life shares metabolism, and nothing else in the inanimate universe comes even close to anything at all like metabolism. Nature is giving us the clues all over the place. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, that's a cool empirical answer. Just on that point, why would we then within one living organism have different dissociations again? So you mentioned that in this picture, A1 and A2 are dissociated. That seems really unuseful to me, that I can't influence my body immediately through that A1.
Oh, I thought I understood your question. I know your final comments threw me off.
I thought you had previously alluded to the fact that we have a sort of internal dissociation again, and we see these subjects as well within psychiatry that have dissociation, right?
Yeah.
And so even between us, it seems like our body is somewhat separated from our conscious experiences. There's a lot of within our autonomic nervous system that we cannot access at all, right? So there seems to be some amount of dissociation where we get an impingement from perception internally.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, why would that happen? Because it is still one biological system.
Okay. It's important to notice that when I talk about dissociative identity disorder at a universal level, it's a metaphor. It's something like what we call dissociative identity disorder. Because clearly, the scales are so different, it cannot be the exact same process. It can be a process of the same nature. And that's what I mean to say. That a process of the nature of dissociation, analogous to dissociation, happens at a universal level. But dissociation is defined as something that happens in human beings. So it cannot be literally dissociation. It's a semantic point, but anyway. I have nothing against the possibility that that form of dissociation at a universal level can happen in nested levels. In other words, universal consciousness can dissociate into alters that we call living beings, and each alter can dissociate further. And there's an image to that too, as we know from brain scans. Now, I want to add something to this answer. It is indeed possible that dissociation explains why we are not able to introspect. Okay, let me give an introduction first. The implication of what I'm saying is that the whole of our bodies, not only the neurocorrelates of experiencing of consciousness in the brain, the whole of our bodies is the extrinsic appearance of inner life. That's the claim. And none of you has picked up on that because it could be construed as a weak point in what I'm saying. The experiences I can report correlate with measurable neurocorrelates of consciousness in my brain. So those processes, there's something they feel like. But what about liver function? To what kind of experience does my liver function correspond? What about toe function? What about my big toe? According to what I'm saying, my big toe should be the extrinsic appearance of experience. What experience? Am I experiencing something that corresponds to my big toe? I'm not. Actually, I am. And that's what I want to submit to you right now. There is a difference between consciousness and meta-consciousness. Right? Experience implies only phenomenal properties. There should be something it is like to have the experience. But to report, to be able to introspect and report on an experience to yourself or to somebody else, you need more than to just experience it. You need to know that you experience it. That's self-reflection. That's conscious metacognition. That's metaconscious. There are many names for it, but we understand that's consciousness folding in on itself in order to experience knowledge of its experiences. It's kind of a mirror effect in there. Now, to report something, to report an experience, even to ourselves, we need to know that we experience it. In other words, introspection only accesses the field of metaconsciousness, which is a subset of the field of consciousness. Consciousness is much bigger. An example to bring this to life. Think of your breathing right now. Feel it, the air flowing through your nostril, your lungs inflating. Can you experience it? It's very clear, isn't it? Oh, it's right there. I can experience it all. Were you not experiencing your breathing 30 seconds ago before I brought your attention to it? Or you were experiencing it, but you simply didn't know that you were experiencing your breathing because your attention was not there. Do you see what I'm trying to point to? My claim is you were experiencing your breathing. You didn't magically become conscious just because I said some words, and magically there is an ontological transition from unconsciousness to consciousness. No, it was in consciousness all along, but your focus of metacognition was not there. Therefore, you couldn't report to yourself that you were experiencing it, but you were experiencing it. So my claim would be that there are two mechanisms to explain your question, to explain why toe function corresponds to inner experience. One is the difference between consciousness and metaconsciousness. Maybe I cannot introspectively access my toe function, but it is there as an experience. And the other one is nested dissociation. There can be internal dissociation in the human mind-body system that prevents the executive ego, a particular dissociated complex, from introspecting into the contents of another dissociated complex that may correspond to the rest of my body. Actually, depth psychology, which is rooted in this very city, in the figure of Carl Jung, over 100 years ago now, is based on this very idea that there is a natural internal dissociation in the human psyche. That the so-called unconscious is inherent part of the human psyche, but it's dissociated from consciousness. Of course, what Jung, Freud, and the others meant with consciousness and unconsciousness was simply metaconsciousness and consciousness. If you read them, it's abundantly clear that what they called consciousness, they meant with that conscious metacognition. Correct.
What have been the main influences on your theory, like the fields that you've been drawing from?
Psychology, a lot. Because of my early career at CERN, quantum physics, although I'm not a physicist, physics was, the key thing in my life for many years. I breathed it day in, day out. I loved it. I still love it. Many trends of philosophy. Eastern philosophy came to me after I had already a fairly complete draft of my ideas, because people started accusing me of plagiarism, which confused me because I thought, whoa, if I'm committing plagiarism, I was not aware of it. I started reading Eastern philosophy, Advaita Vedanta and that stuff. And I recognized, there are many resonances, but it was not an influencer in the sense that I was not aware of it when I started working on it. Even hermeneutics has been influencing me recently. Some Western philosophers of religion, like Henri Corbin, people who translated traditional knowledge into modern Western languages, and I see some clear resonances there. So Jung was a big influencer to me. His whole idea of the unus mundus, the identity between the unconscious and the physical world, also a big influencer. Thomas Kuhn, big influencer. His idea that there is no such a thing as objective data. It's all based on the paradigms of mind that you're using, open many doors. I could go on and on, but you get the gist.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have two questions, but I will start with the more practical one before I ask the systemic one. You said that it's sort of regrettable that this is not a discussion outside of like a very small specialized field of like physics and quantum physics.
Yeah, that specific point, yeah.
Etc. Yeah, but this whole model, this whole interpretation, like if this were to enter the, say, collective conscious or
the mainstream.
The mainstream. What do you hope would change? What kind of consequences will we draw?
I will answer. but I don't want my answer to be construed as my motivation for doing what I'm doing.
No. What do you think, what influence would it have in general?
Yeah. My motivation for doing this is because I think it's true.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
That's basically, I'm interested in what's true. Beyond any consequence, any implication, whatever it might come, I'm interested in what's true. I want to know what's true. Now, I do think this is positive for other reasons. If it is true, it would still be positive for other reasons. I'll mention one that's very close to me. Many people, probably appropriate for this audience as well, many people have experiences that seem to contradict materialism. You may have those spontaneously, you may have those during meditation, you may have those when you're exhausted, you may have those when you're tripping on psychedelics. And then after the experience, which is in principle very informative, very enlightening, very insightful, the intellect as the bouncer of the rest of your psychic functions will discard it, will filter it out and say, this cannot be true, therefore I'm not going to let it sink in, I'm not going to incorporate it into my life, and I will reject it. And then soon enough you forget it because it cannot be true, so it's not true. I think this would give you intellectual permission, if you buy into this conceptually, intellectually, that alone will not change your life. A conceptual model is not transformative, it changes nobody's life. If you're neurotic and you're suffering, and you believe in a conceptual model like this intellectually, you still be neurotic, you still be suffering, you still be anxious, you still be a mess. But if you already bought conceptually into this, and it's running in the background of your mind, and then you have a truly transformative first-person experience, now you can say, hey, but maybe this is valid. Maybe I can accept it instead of dismissing or filtering it out. And I think that would be a very positive outcome of this.
Okay, so my more systemic question. You said that pretty much since all that we perceive can be seen as like the sort of what the internal cognitive process of the universe seems to the outside. Now, our internal workings are not just random thoughts, they form some sort of personality in certain aspects. So would you say that this is also true with the universe? Because you made the assumption that the structure of the universe is very similar to the structure of a brain. And that would mean that there is some form of higher consciousness or something.
I will answer in the negative. I don't think so.
Okay.
And now the burden is on me to now explain why I don't think so, despite what you pointed out. To go back to the structure of the universe, which is how you started your question. If you look at the dimensions of the universe and the signal propagation times, you will see that there cannot be information integration at the universal level in the sense that there is information integration in the brain. There has not been enough time since the origin of the universe for these signals to become integrated and form loops. In other words, there has not been enough time for the inanimate universe to create meta-consciousness or self-reflection or metacognition. For the inanimate universe to have that thought, oh, I am this. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Who am I? And if you don't have self-reflection and metacognition, you form no personality structures. You have to be able to have that self-reflection first in order to form a personality structure. Otherwise, you're operating in a purely instinctual manner, like ants. I don't want to compare the inanimate universe to an ant, because a lot of people will make immediately the correspondence between what I'm talking about and God, and then they will think I'm saying that God is an ant. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not devaluing the inanimate universe. I do think self-reflection has a reason within biology.
Yeah. Okay, so but you're treating like consciousness of individuals as like alter egos of like sort of originating from the same thing.
Correct.
But like if that same thing has had nothing of that sort, would that mean that all of these evolved individually?
The inheritance of properties would apply only to fundamental properties. What I'm saying is that self-reflection is not fundamental.
So would you say that these alter egos have an underlying commonality that follows from those fundamentals?
They're alters, and alter ego means something else, but I understand you. I think the alters inherit certain fundamental properties from universal consciousness. And those are subjectivity itself and a perspectival view, a perspective into a phenomenal field. Those are inherent to universal consciousness, and we then inherit them because we are part of universal consciousness. But I don't think self-reflection is a fundamental property inherent to universal consciousness. I think it's contingent. It depends on the particular phenomenal structure that arises within an alter, which has dimensions that are amenable to, given signal propagation times, they're amenable to self-reflection. You know what I mean? And that's where the thought, oh, but I am feeling like that. I'm thinking this. And you can think about your thoughts. And you can think about the thoughts that you have about your thoughts, and so on and so forth. I think that's an alter thing. It's contingent. It's emergent. It's not fundamental. Therefore, it's not inherited from the substrate, from the ontological primitive that underlies the alters.
And so that means that in principle, it can be very different in every alter, pretty much.
Only insofar as human beings can be different from one another. But we are still humans, and there are commonalities implied by the fact that we are members of the same species, and that applies to that too.
Okay.
I have a very speculative question. How does the idea of death fit in your model? So when an individual dies?
Great question. The answer is simple. If life is the image of dissociation, what is death?
Yeah, probably the inversion.
It's the image of the end of dissociation. Unification is a loaded word. I try to avoid it. So I prefer to say death is the image of the end of dissociation. And things that are analogous to death, cardiac arrest, psychedelic trances that reduce your brain activity, may give you glimpses into how that feels like from a first-person perspective. If your brain activity is really reduced, what do you have? You have psychedelic trance. Maybe a psychedelic trance gives you a hint about what it feels like to go through the end of dissociation. Maybe NDEs, metaphorical as they are, give you hints about the end of dissociation, insofar as it's a kind of rehearsed death. You know, your heart stops. And I'm talking about NDEs defined in the classical sense, cardiac arrest. Because now people call spontaneous experiences, they call them NDEs too. So the term has become loose.
Excuse me, we actually have this question, but
Can you use the mic just because of the recording? I don't know if you're picking up straight from the mic or you're picking up from the mic. Okay.
We actually wrote this question down. Why would alter die, and why on such a predictable time scale?
0 to 100, you know? Why
I don't feel the need to offer any more insight into this than can be derived from science. I'm not contradicting science. Whatever insights science has given us about the length of human life and why it lasts this long and not more, and what are the mechanisms that lead to the deterioration and ultimate end of human life, I would import all of them into my terminology. Science is telling me what's the time length that an alter lasts, and what physical mechanisms contribute to the dissolution of the dissociative boundary. I offer no extra insight, and I don't feel the need to offer any extra insight. What I'm trying to do is a philosophical interpretation of nature. I'm not trying to replace science in adding to our knowledge of the behavior of nature, if you know what I mean. I'm trying to interpret that and not to do an alternative kind of science. Far from me. Do you understand what I'm... Okay, but I think I understand the spirit of your question, so I'll add something. If you had asked me, which you didn't, but if you had asked me, why did universal consciousness decide to form alters so prone to suffering in which we will ultimately die? I would answer in the following way. I don't think universal consciousness knows what it's doing. I don't think it's self-reflective. I think it's instinctual. It's playing out its inherent patterns, because that's what it is.
That brings us to the next question, that is that which aware, what was it, TWE,
That which experiences.
that's which experiences, is aware of alter or not?
You see, the moment an outer forms, there's a dissociative boundary, and there's an inside and an outside. You can call the outside an outer too. So the inanimate universe is an outer. It's an outer that encompasses everything that is not within life. So this outer here, right? Now, as an outer, it also has a dissociative boundaries here. This plus this plus this. So the inanimate universe perceives us, but from a perspective that is the reverse, the reverse side. We are the obverse side, and the inanimate universe is perceiving us from the other side, which is completely incommensurate to what we perceive. Don't try even to imagine what that is like. I have no clue. It may be like us, but it may be completely different. I put my money on it being completely different and incommensurate to human perception. But it perceives us through impingement on these dissociative boundaries as well. Our thoughts impinge on these boundaries from within. And that impingement has an effect here that is analogous to perception. I hesitate to call it perception because perception is associated with life. That something like perception happens here. So yes, also, if we manipulate the inanimate universe by constructing buildings, that's equivalent to somebody going and poking in our brains. Right? It's the exact equivalent of that. If a neurosurgeon goes and pokes in my brain, it impacts my inner life. Depending on what is stimulated or disturbed, I can have all kinds of fantastic experiences. I think the same happens there. Our physical action in the world leads to changes in the inner life of the inanimate universe. But now we have to keep it in perspective. We are unimaginably tiny little things in a tiny little planet of one of gazillions of galaxies. Will these things really, really suffer or be happy because we put a building at the end of the street? I don't think so.
So regarding the inherent patterns of that which experiences, can you put provocatively in the words of Alan Watts that a knife cannot cut itself, a fire cannot burn itself, and the mind cannot understand itself? Can you comment on this?
I can comment on this,
that which experiences, knowing what it's doing, perhaps, and also in the words of Hinduism, that, well, everything is regarded as one manifestation of the divine, just dancing its divine play.
Yeah. This is metaphorical and beautiful as such. I'll try to translate that into something that's not metaphorical, it's more direct. When we talk about understanding something, what we mean is we're trying to explain it to ourselves, right? Understanding implies explaining it to ourselves. What do we mean by an explanation? An explanation is a reduction. We explain one thing in terms of another, A in terms of B. For instance, I explain your body in terms of your organ systems. Then I explain your organ systems in terms of tissues. Then I explain tissues in terms of cells, cells in terms of molecules, atoms, subatomic particles, the quantum field. Right? Each step of explanation is a reduction from you to the quantum field. Right? That's what we call explanation. The problem is, and that applies to any theory of nature, any philosophy, anything, and all things, you cannot explain one thing in terms of another forever. At some point, you hit rock bottom and you say, now nature just is. At this level, it just is. It's just what there is. There's no explanation. Therefore, you cannot understand it because you cannot explain it to yourself. There is no explanation. Literally, whatever that level is, I say consciousness is at that level. Some would say it's the quantum field, some would say it's the superstring, some would say it's the hyperdimensional brain, some would say it's the menu of fundamental particles of the standard model. Right? The bosons, the force-carrying particles, and all that stuff. But there is that ultimate level. If consciousness is at that ultimate level, you can never understand consciousness because you will not explain it. Is it bad? Not at all. You don't want to explain it. It's that in terms of which you explain everything else. That's its value. That's what's important. If it is the primitive, what you have to do is to explain everything else in terms of it. You don't need to explain it because it's at the bottom of the chain of reduction.
So there is no closure in the end. Looking at it.
Of course there is. The closure is in explaining everything else in terms of your primitive. Anything beyond this is a senseless abstraction of thought.
But are you then explained by the complement of what you can explain?
Say it again.
Can you explain yourself by the complement of everything that you can explain? So you say there is everything I can explain, but there is something I cannot explain. Do you infer what you cannot explain? So it may be the true experience of TV by the complement of everything that you can explain.
I don't think so. Because now what you're imagining is there is a whole, and then I explain a subset of it, and the other subset of the whole is implied by what I did explain. What I'm talking about is levels, each subsets of a whole. I'm saying that there is a bottom level, there's a ground level of nature that is irreducible by definition. So you cannot make inferences about it based on the stuff that is reduced to it. Now that I just said it, I don't agree with what I just said. So let me qualify. Let me qualify. Here's a thought experiment. The only sense you have is the sense of hearing. You cannot see, you cannot smell, you cannot taste, you cannot touch. And you could never, you were born like that. You're in ear, you only hear. Nothing else. Okay? Now, somebody takes a guitar string. You cannot touch it. You don't know that it's long, you don't know that it's curly, you don't know that it's cold. If you put it in your tongue, you don't feel it. You don't know that it tastes metallic. You can't see it. You don't know that it has color. You don't know that it has shape, extension. This is incommensurate to you. You can't even imagine it because you were born without the other four senses. But somebody goes and plucks the guitar string and makes a sound. Now you heard it. Can you infer the material of the guitar string, how it's constructed, how long it is from the sound? You can. Of course you can. Any sound theorist, any sound specialist will tell you that from the sound, from the pitch, from the frequency, you can infer the material properties of the thing that is vibrating to create that sound. So yes, you could infer, but it would be forever abstraction for you because it's not commensurate to anything you can visualize. So I think experiences are the excitations of consciousness, and we are the person that can only hear. We hear those excitations. It's everything. Everything. Our thoughts, feelings, perceptual images, what we hear, what we see, how we feel, everything. These are the excitations of that guitar string. What the guitar string is forever inaccessible to us. But maybe we can make some inferences. For instance, the universe seems to be going somewhere. Could we infer telos behind nature? Perhaps. Perhaps we could infer telos. Jung talked of archetypes, psychological archetypes. Could the laws of nature be archetypes of universal consciousness? And if so, what does it inform us about the inner life of this thing here, the inanimate universe? Maybe we can make some educated guesses. But if you want to really pin it down what it is, no.
So I fully agree that by complexification there are limitations, by you understanding from the standpoint of an author. So going back, if you could experience the TVE perspective, do you understand more than from your author perspective? So this goes back to my quote, if I am lost, the mind cannot understand itself. Because the mind is all presupposed that you are an author. But if you remove an author, then you have everything. So there is no need to complexification, just a method of explanation. Like language is our method of, well, someone ethically communicate some ideas from one dictionary to the other. But by removing this and going back perhaps and removing the boundaries, some understanding could be gained.
I think some understanding of the inherent motivations, patterns of behavior could be achieved. Suppose there were no authors and you were TWE. You were it, and there are no authors. So you can experience it all. There's no dissociation. You could make educated inferences about what motivates you, the chains of associations that you make in your psychic life, like what kinds of thoughts lead to what kinds of feelings, what kinds of memories are evoked depending on what kinds, you know what I mean? But these are all behavioral inferences. Even if you were TWE without authors, and you ask yourself, but what am I intrinsically? Good luck. No, if you are at the bottom of the chain of reduction, to answer that question would imply making another reduction. By definition, you are at the bottom of the chain of reduction. That question is unanswerable. Maybe, people who didn't ask a question yet.
I have a question to the nature of these boundaries. So you said before that this rest universe sees our inner world also from outside. But is it clear that this boundary is blocking both sides, or could it be that it's blocking only in one side and the external world also sees me and you're inside, or is there a reason why one or the other picture should be correct?
I understand that. The answer I would like to give you is that the situation is perfectly symmetric, because it satisfies my aesthetical sense. I would like that to be the case. No, I like symmetry. When I was working at CERN, I was sure supersymmetric particles would be found. Of course they would be found. I mean, it's already a reality. We haven't found them, but it's so elegant that it has to be true. Guess what? They haven't been found. They're probably not there. And I'm still pissed off about it for the past 2 years. So I would like this to be entirely symmetric. But I can't help but be honest with the empirical data. And the empirical data tells us that dissociation can be asymmetric. There is a famous case studied by Morton Prince decades ago, the case of Mrs. Beauchamp. And she had an author, forgotten, Sally was the name of the author. The authors give themselves names. Sally claimed that she was aware of Miss Beauchamp's life even when she was not in control of the body. So as the person was going about her life, Sally in the background, without executive control of the body, knew what Miss Beauchamp knew, could see what Miss Beauchamp could see. She was privy to the entire inner life of Miss Beauchamp. But the other way around was not true. The inner life of Sally was not accessible to the executive ego. How does that work? I don't know. Cognitive associations flow in one way, but not in another. There's nothing really fundamental that would preclude this possibility. I would prefer that this were not the case, but there is empirical data that shows that it can happen. So could it happen here too? For all I know, it could. I hope not. I hope my private inner life is not accessible. Anyway.
So now I quote what puzzles me from the beginning. So you just told that the whole theory is based on the similarity of mouse brain structure and universal structure, right? But you just thought that this is not true because well, it looks like a structural similarity, but like. In biology, we know that dolphins look like the same as fishes, right? They stay in the same.
But they are very different.
But they are very different in the inner structure, right? And this makes them very different. And you just thought that the universe was too big for having interactions between parts. And human brains, we also know it works because of interaction between parts on a scale of incredible scale. So now. Again,
I got your question.
Universum has thoughts and emotions.
Yeah.
If it's not the same structure.
Yeah, it's a matter of the scale of applicability of the metaphor that I tried to convey. But to be very specific, I'm not talking about mere communication between parts. That clearly happens at the universal scale. Gravity waves are traversing the universe. Light is traversing the universe. Now, signals in the entire electromagnetic spectrum are traversing the universe at the speed of light. So there is communication. What I meant was information integration. And I was alluding to Giulio Tononi's theory of consciousness, which requires a certain amount of information integration and a closed loop of information flow to be integrated and cross a certain threshold that he calls phi for there to be conscious experience. That's what I was alluding to. My claim is the following. What Tononi calls consciousness is actually meta-consciousness. You need sufficient information integration to know that you experience. But you do not need that to experience. I don't think my cat has enough phi in order to be aware of its own experiences. You can relate to that because according to research done in 2007 by Metzinger and others, I forgot where it was done, when you dream, your state of consciousness in a dream is not self-reflective. You do not have that thought during the dream, oh, I'm having this experience. No, you're like a leaf in the wind. You just go instinctively with the flow of the dream. You are not meta-conscious during a dream. Maybe my cat has a similar experience of life. Life is a dream for my cat. It's not asking itself, oh, but I'm having this feeling, I'm having this thought, and how will I feel tomorrow? I regret what happened yesterday. No, that doesn't happen, right? So it's instinctual. My claim is that at the scale of the cosmos, the scale involved is such that information integration sufficient to lead to self-reflection is impossible. But my cat doesn't have self-reflection, and it is conscious. When I dream, I'm not self-reflective, but I experience. So the cosmos can experience. It can be conscious, just not in a self-reflective manner. That was my sole claim. Now the similarities, the scale of the similarity, what I meant to say when I said that the structure of the universe is similar to the structure of a biological brain, was just to evoke this experiential commonality. Both seem to be the outside image of experience. But experience has many forms, many degrees of self-reflection. I mean, experience can totally vary between an ant and a human being. My point was that the cosmos and human beings both experience, but it didn't mean to imply a similarity, a qualitative similarity of those experiences. I don't think the inner life of the inanimate universe feels at all like my inner life. I think it's totally different. It's completely incommensurate. So there doesn't need to be an extraordinary similarity in the structure of the cosmos and my brain. So long as they both look like nervous systems in general lines, I feel able to point to that as a circumstantial indication that all matter at all levels is the extrinsic appearance of experiential inner life. Was my answer to
I understand you, but I don't believe you.
That's fine. That's fine.
Nothing underlies.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm not hurt. Yeah.
All right. The last couple of questions we have on the phone.
I think he didn't ask a question yet. Just so you know.
Thanks. You've already answered my question partly. I was going to ask you whether there's any real fundamental difference between the dreaming state and this so-called waking state. Because when you're dreaming, that dream is for you reality. You know no other reality.
Correct.
And in the waking state, it's the same. So what you just said about 5 minutes ago was a difference perhaps in characteristic that you can self-analyze when you're awake and count when you're dreaming. It's not a difference in fundamental type. It's just
correct.
An attribute, let's say.
Yeah.
So I'd like you to comment on that.
Yeah, the claim of lack of meta-consciousness in dreams does not apply to lucid dreams. It's a category apart, right? The study I referred to was about regular dreams, not lucid dreams. Actually, I mistook the name of the first author. I think it was Wind, the first author of that. Whoever is watching the video, don't hold me to that. Sometimes I don't remember exactly everything. I agree with you that essentially dreams and waking reality are the same thing. Surprisingly enough, a materialist would agree with you. I could have a news set stand here and tell you the same thing. He's the guy who says that waking reality is a controlled hallucination. The same neural basis underlies dreams as it underlies our experience of waking reality. The same brain regions are activated depending on what you're experiencing during the dream as they would be activated in waking reality. So that observation holds irrespective of whether you believe me or if you don't believe me, that observation still holds. In the context of what I'm proposing, the difference would be that a dream is an excitation of mind that arises fully within the alter, and therefore it's idiosyncratic and private. And experiential reality is an excitation that arises also on the outside, impinges on the boundary, and therefore leads to an experience inside that ultimately is driven from the outside. And because the outside is common to multiple alters, we all think we share the same world. But because dreams originate only within the alter, this alter, for instance, cannot see or experience the dream of that alter, because there are two dissociative boundaries in between. So waking reality would be a shared dream. And a nightly dream would be a non-shared waking reality.
I see no difference, because when you're dreaming, other people are in your dream. They are also having the same experience as you in the dream.
Then the question I would ask you is the following. Is there something it is like to be those other people in your dreams? Or do they exist only insofar as the image that you experience in the dream? That's the key difference. A solipsist would say, the entire universe is my personal dream. So if I were a solipsist, I would say, you exist only insofar as the image I am experiencing right now. But you have no conscious inner life of your own. There is nothing it feels like to be you. You exist only insofar as what I'm making up in my dream. I am an idealist, so I say, no. There is something it's like to be you. You are also a dissociated alter of universal consciousness, just as I am. Now the question is, when you're dreaming at night, which of these two apply? Are the people that you dream up conscious in their own merit? Is there something it is like to be them? Personally, I don't think so. I think they exist only insofar as you imagine them in your own mind as you are dreaming, and they do not have conscious inner life of their own. Because if I would say that they do, I would run into all kinds of continuity problems, state holding problems, with them. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just decree that I don't want to go there, and therefore I assume they do not have inner life of their own.
This is maybe less a coherent question, more just fodder for thought. Since lucid dreams came up, the idea of non-reflective dreams versus reflective dreams, many non-reflective dreams turn into lucid dreams. And so there's, at some point, something has to click, which would suggest that there's something there waiting to be turned on. Wonder if you have any thoughts on that. And second, actually, if you have any thoughts on
okay, let me answer that first, because it's late in the evening, I may lose the thread. Clearly there is something there waiting to be triggered. It's the same thing that gets triggered when you wake up. Clearly the functionality is there in potentiality. Since you manifest it during the day and your brain certainly didn't completely change, and therefore the structure of your alter didn't completely change, since the brain is the image of it, during the night, the potentiality, the capacity for that to click is there all along, surely. I have no doubt about that.
And the second thing is, with regard to split brain patients, have you given thought to the observations that there's evidence that there are distinct conscious experiences in these two hemispheres, and they reveal themselves when they're severed?
I read recently only the headlines. I didn't have time back then, which I regret, because otherwise I could answer your question more intelligently. But I read recently that there is some new studies saying that the old studies are invalid. So, but since I don't know that in detail, I'll stick with you regarding the old studies, because those I know. Suppose it is true that when you sever the corpus callosum, that you have two distinct centers of consciousness. I would explain that as mere dissociation. Dissociation caused by physical intervention. But in saying that, I'm not appealing to dualism. Notice that since I'm saying that everything is in consciousness, what we call physical intervention is a category of experience. Therefore, it's no more surprising that physical intervention changes your subjective inner life than it should be surprising that your thoughts change your emotions. It's trivial that thoughts change emotions. They are two categories of experience. One can influence the other. Physical intervention is a category of experience. What is physical intervention? It's phenomenal activity here, piercing through the dissociative boundary. But it is phenomenal activity influencing phenomenal activity. So when you cut the corpus callosum, phenomenal activity here pierces through and cuts something here, so it causes dissociation in the alter and splits this bubble into two bubbles. That's how I would make sense of that. If it is true that there are two centers of consciousness, but I heard noises that it's not true, so I don't know. If it's not true, I'm fine with that too.
All right, two more questions. Someone hasn't asked a question yet, perhaps?
Otherwise, good. Last chance.
He wanted to ask a question, but he's holding back because he already asked one question.
I was giving it to him, but waiting.
Oh, okay.
I don't know whether it's kind of related to what you answered the question before this question, but for me it's still kind of arbitrary why you say that this dissociation is connected to a biological body. In your, when you mentioned like empirical data or the assumptions you mentioned at the beginning. For example, on the one extreme, like I heard of plants which fold themselves together if rain drops falling on them. And I can say, okay, I don't like rain too, so I assume this kind of plant has also a consciousness which kind of reacts on raindrops like I would do. On the other extreme, I would say I can't experience the consciousness of other people, so I can also assume there doesn't exist a consciousness out of my consciousness, so all other people are, I don't know, some kind of manifestation of matrix or something like that. So where stops this arbitrary between when you say that we humans have dissociation?
I understand. If you do not want to make any inference, if you want to operate purely on the basis of deduction and not inference, you have to stop at solipsism. In other words, this whole thing is your private dream. There's nothing else going on. What you don't experience doesn't exist. Other people are not conscious. They only exist insofar as they appear to you. That avoids all inferences. You are the sole conscious being that exists. Everything else is a play of your own dream, as it appears to you. That's solipsism. It's okay. It cannot be defeated. You cannot disprove solipsism. It is not falsifiable, because whatever evidence I present to you, you will always have to say to yourself, I made this up. It's my private dream. I'm making up everything, including the evidence against that it's a private dream. Now, if that satisfies you, okay, it profoundly dissatisfies me. If I believed that, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I would just be at home, rolled up in a corner and wait to die, because it's all my private dream anyway. So what's the point of, so the moment you reject solipsism, you have to make an inference. Because anything beyond your direct, immediate experience is an inference. So unless you say that it's all only your direct, immediate experience, solipsism, you have to make an inference. Then the question is, which inference is more reasonable, consistent with the empirical data, parsimonious, and internally consistent? These are the questions that you have to make. And my position is to associate biology with dissociated alters is the most empirically honest, internally consistent, and parsimonious position to take. You may disagree, but...
yeah, that's why I presented this whole interval. I didn't mean to say that I'm like the one extreme or the other extreme, but it's kind of, I don't know, I like the idea that I'm this human, I am so special that I can dissociate, but and then I can infer some animals can, some animals can't. Then I mean,
yeah. Look, the game of philosophy is not a game of certainty. It's a game of best guesses. It's a game of how close can you get to the truth, knowing full well that you're never really there. And living with that uncertainty is part of the human condition.
One last question.
Hi. Let's assume everything is right and makes it simple. I find it very convincing from a lot of aspects. I'm going to assume something that's, let's say, this TWE, and you briefly mentioned it, would have, probably doesn't have any motivation or purpose or whatever, but what would be his points of sub-generating these different alters? And can you speculate on, based on whatever evolutionary theory, how this could continue unfolding in time?
Yeah. I don't reject the possibility that TWE prior to alters, that which experiences or universal consciousness, I've been using different names, let's call it TWE now. I don't reject the possibility that TWE has had, has, and will have purpose. What I'm rejecting is that it is self-reflective. In other words, that it is deliberate. My cat has purposes, but it may not be deliberate in the sense that my cat ponders its purposes. My cat follows its purposes instinctually. So I don't deny that there may be an instinct inherent to TWE that we would call a purpose or a telos, or some place it wants to go, something it's trying to reach, instinctively, but still teleologically, in other words, purpose-driven. So I just wanted to make that caveat. Now, why do alters form? And you know, if I were in a philosophy conference, I would answer this very simply, and philosophers would accept it. I would just say, TWE has the inherent disposition to dissociate. And it would end there. You know what I mean? There is an inherent disposition, an inherent capacity, a potentiality for that to happen, even a tendency for that to happen, and it does happen. If I translate that into the language of science, I would just say the following. The laws of nature are such that this can happen. Probably they are such that this eventually will happen, because it can happen. And everybody would be satisfied with that. Now, why were you not satisfied with that? And why perhaps the entire room is not satisfied with that? Is that the moment we say this is sentient, then we project immediately onto it our deliberate way of thinking. Our idea that we purposefully decide what we would do and what we will not do. And yet, if you really look to yourselves, how many of your thoughts do you control? Did you control the thought you just had? Do you control your dreams? Do you control your anxieties, your fears? Do you control your imagination? Now, most of the things you experience are totally out of your control. They just happen. They come and go, and you have absolutely no control of it. I have all kinds of neuroses myself. I have no control over my neuroses. When I'm anxious, bloody, I'm anxious. If I'm depressed and I'm having somber thoughts, I can't control them. Same thing here. I don't think, same thing, even more extreme here, because I don't think it's self-reflective. It doesn't even have these thoughts that, I can't control my thoughts. That's a self-reflective thought. It's a thought about thoughts. I don't think this, prior to alters, has even that. It's an instinctual flow whose regularities we call the laws of nature. And clearly, alter formation is a potentiality of those regularities, and therefore it happens.
On this note, I want to thank you, Bernardo. I want to thank the audience. This was a very stimulating discussion. I had a pleasure.